I called to order the EDC for the City of Snoqualmie on January 18th at 2 a.m. First call to order is roll call. So we've got Jason Rogers, Kara, Jason, Emily, Joelle Gibson, Ryan Seal, Sherry Jennings, Rob McDonald, and Bobby Harrison. And then agenda approved.
Move to approve.
Second.
Is there any public comments? Okay, and I don't know who's on next. So is it, who's on next? Election to chair.
Can't hear you.
Okay, I can handle the election of the chair. So some brief introductory things. The Economic Development Commission elects a chair to a one-year term. Typically, the election occurs at the first meeting of the year, and all the appointed commissioners are eligible to serve as the chair. The election of the chair, well, actually, before I continue, I don't know if the mayor has any comments you'd like to make on, or I can certainly continue if you'd prefer.
I guess one thing about the chair is, I know Bobby's been doing it for 2.5 years and appreciate all your leadership. And the election, someone stepping in the chair provides leadership role, I guess different perspectives and things like that. And so we just want to make sure that all commissioners have a chance at some point to lead the EDC. So anyone can nominate themselves or they can be nominated.
The election of chair does provide a great opportunity, as the mayor said, for commissioners to step up into a leadership role and help bring new and different ideas for a meeting format and items of speakers and training. So this is going to be a busy 2020. We have the comprehensive plan update, of course, which you've all heard about before. And also the city as a whole is working on implementation of the budget that the council just passed last fall, and also various capital improvement projects. So like I said, busy year, a lot of big things going on. As far as procedure, and I can handle that this morning, I'll open the floor. And as the mayor said, you can nominate yourself, you can nominate another commissioner. The nominations do not require a second, but they do need to be accepted. So if somebody's nominated that does not want to serve, they could decline the nomination, for example. I'll make sure that we do hear all nominations from the floor. And then once we're sure that there are no more, I'll close nominations. We'll then have an opportunity for the nominee or nominees to speak to their qualifications and their desires and what they want to be the chair, what they would hope to accomplish. Following that, we'll have an opportunity for commission discussion, if there is any, and then we'll move to a vote. And to become the chair, you need to carry a majority of the commissioners. So we have, I believe, 5 here today. You'll need a minimum vote. If nobody gains a majority in the first round, we have to continue voting until somebody gets a majority. Certainly there's opportunities to call for recesses in here so that people can take a moment and think some more. But we do, of course, need to vote, with the open meeting going because of the Open Public Meetings Act. Any questions before we proceed further? Okay, so with that, commissioners, does anyone wish to nominate a commissioner or wish to? Sorry. All right, sorry, does anyone wish to nominate a commissioner or to nominate themselves to serve as chair of the Economic Development Commission?
I nominate Bobby.
All right, we have a nomination for. Do you accept the nomination?
I do.
All right, so we have on the floor. Are there any other nominations?
I nominate Bobby Harrison for a second term.
Thank you. I think Bobby's already been nominated, so
Oh, okay, I apologize, the process, okay.
no, you're fine. All right, are there any further nominations for chair?
Are you interested?
This round. Thank you.
This round.
Going once? Going twice? Okay, nominations are now closed. So Bobby, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to say. You don't have to, but this is an opportunity for you.
Yeah, I would be honored to serve again and provide, the community side and the business side to support the city. The mayor and I had a good conversation on Monday, and I think there's some forward strides that we can do as a team, collaborative, with some transparency and good communication, and just make it a lot more robust and just get some community goals between the city and the commission.
All right, thank you. Is there any discussion from the commission?
Yeah, I'll just add a few comments. I know there was some interest in me being nominated for chair, and I just wanted to put it on the record that, I come to the commission with a lot of background in comp plan and EDC and working with Snoqualmie, and I am honored to bring that here to this commission and to work collaboratively. I don't think it really doesn't matter, for me who has the title. I think working collaboratively and with the relationships that we've built over the last year. And I think that, when you come into a chair position, it takes a couple of years to actually get your legs under you, and especially in a time during COVID. So, it's like the COVID time didn't even matter, right? Like what happened in the last couple of years? So now really the rubber hits the road, and it's going to be exciting, and there is a lot of work ahead of us. And I look forward to collaborating with everybody and, and moving things forward. So good luck, Bob.
Any other discussion, commission? All right, seeing none, we'll move to a vote now. So Bobby Harrison is nominated. So all those in favor of Bobby being chair for 2023, please say aye.
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 All right, all those opposed say no. Very well, the ayes have it, and Bobby Harrison is elected as chair. Congratulations. Hey, thank you. I'll turn the meeting back to you, Chair.
So next item is approval of minutes dated from November 16th, 2022. Does anyone approve?
I move to approve the minutes.
Second.
So next is on to new business, the economic development element. So some training and data points. That might be Emily.
Jason, would you kick this off with your staff memo, or? I can also do that too, if it'd be helpful.
So I just have to pull it up here. I'm trying to keep notes at the same time as I go here. Good morning again. Let me hit my screen share so you can see what I'm trying to talk to you about. So we included this memo in your packet. As you know, we've discussed the economic development element at a prior meeting with the Economic Development Commission, and how we have a periodic update to the city's comprehensive plan due by the end of 2024. And I don't know if it's just my eyes or if you can't really read that. Zoom it in a little more. So as we've discussed before, the current plan is organized into, there's really two elements that relate to economic development here directly. One is the vision and policy element, which is element number one. That contains all of the various goals and objectives and policies within the comprehensive plan in one central location. The other one, of course, is the economic development element itself. And that's where there's more in-depth discussion of economic development and different, if you will, target industry cluster, for example, and implementation strategies around economic development. As we move through this update, we're going to be looking at a couple of major things here. One is going to be streamlining the goals, objectives, and policies into more of just a goal policy orientation. And so instead of having this very hierarchical, here's a goal, here's some objectives under it, here's a bunch of policies, we really want to be a little more centralized around here's a goal and here's the various policies around it that, as to how we're going to accomplish this goal, how we're going to implement it. And that will serve to make it a little more accessible and sort of just kind of flatten the structure of the plan a bit to make it easier for us to manage and implement, and make it easier for this commission, our other commissions, city staff, everybody to understand the plan, understand what we're trying to accomplish. To help the commission a little more, we provide some training from PSRC. They have this, they're calling it the Passport to 2044 series. We watched a video back on September 7th, and today we have Jason.
Well, actually, we're going to start with, excuse me, Jason, we're going to start with just a small snippet from that training to give you a regional feel for what's going on in the economy. And from there, we'll bring in our speaker from PSRC, Jason, who will give you the information that's applicable to Snoqualmie itself, the local data.
All right, so first up, we will have the video, and let me do this. I need to hit this button.
So this segment is presented by Craig Hellman of PSRC. And it's a great introduction to getting our feet wet on updating the economic development element.
Fast forward on me there. So you'll excuse me, I learned the hard way that I need to unmute my computer to make this work, and I don't want to have feedback, so I'm going to take my computer out of the room and hit play.
Start sharing my screen here. Hopefully everyone will see it, and I will, although I'm told no one can hear it, but with economic activity happening outside my window as they're working on the waterfront, there continues to be jackhammering and dropping things into big trucks. So if you hear things, I apologize for that, or if I seem distracted, that's it. Maggie already mentioned everything in here is if you have questions as I go through the slides, please enter them in the Q&A. Liz will be kind of monitoring that. And at the end of my short little presentation here, I'm happy to answer any of those Q&As that come up. Just have a few slides to kind of take you through kind of the mix of some population, housing, and job trends that we're seeing in the region. Just kind of to ground us all and give us some context, we are planning for about 5.8 million people in our region by 2050. In 2020, we had about 4.3 million people in our region. So we're looking at about another 1.5 million people in 30 years. Do the math, that's about 50,000 people a year. Despite the impacts of a global pandemic, the dark purple line here is showing you where we're at in population observed. And then the lighter purple line is showing our forecast out to 2050. So if you can see roughly, right, despite the pandemic, we're actually slightly above the growth forecast of where we were at in 2022. We're at about 4.4 million people right now in 2022. A vast majority of our population growth is accounted for by migration. The darker purple line on the bottom of these bars here kind of shows you that kind of natural increase. You can see how that natural increase has actually been decreasing over time. Our birth rate has been declining. And so you can see even pre-pandemic, that purple was decreasing. You can really start to see the impact of the pandemic and the impact on increased number of deaths, as well as a reduction in birth rate. You can see how much smaller that purple bar has gotten. But you can kind of look at these ones and you can see the vast majority of the growth in our region is driven by migration. And a big reason people migrate to our region is a robust, healthy economy, as well as our beautiful natural settings that are around us. I'd made that comment. If you kind of think about, if you just straight line the growth out between 2020 and 2050, we would be adding about 50,000 people a year. And if you look at kind of this line here at 50,000 people, even in the last year, we surpassed that 50,000 line. Coming out of the Great Recession, you can see how much lower things were, and you can definitely see that impact. We were basically barely growing in terms of anything in terms of migrating to the region, but that definitely, as the economy rebounded, we have definitely seen a strong return to migration to our region for jobs. With all that population growth, we're estimating we need about 1 million new housing units by 2050. And so kind of following that same thing that I was just showing you on the previous slide, you can see the darker green in this case is the observed number of housing units. And then the lighter green line is the forecast for those housing units. And you can see we're basically right on the line kind of where we're at in housing units. If you do that same sort of math as you work out and do the calculation, right, it's about 33,000 housing units a year we would need to add to the region. So if I kind of look at our next slide here, you can see in 2022, we added about 28,000 housing units. So we're a little bit below where we're at there, but we're definitely growing robustly. But you can see almost 70% of new housing units in this region have been added in the last decade, have been multifamily housing units. You can kind of see the different colors. Once again, you can see the production coming out of the Great Recession, well under 10,000 units. And you can see where we're at as we've hit into the 2020s. Despite the pandemic, a lot of the construction was going on, right? And so we continued to see growth in the early, in the last 2 years, despite all that was going on in the region. I should say really the world. And so then as we kind of look at the job growth, and I have 2 slides to try to highlight this. And I would say here the region has finally returned to our job levels that we had in 2019. You kind of look at this as an annual change. So this is as the end of July. So this is each year. And you can see compared to the previous year at the end of July. So the impact of the pandemic here, that bar is down 176,800, almost 177,000 jobs disappeared between 2019 and 2020 due to the pandemic. In these last couple of years, you can kind of see this bar almost mutes it, but in the last year, we added almost 100,000 jobs to our region. So in the last 2 years, we've actually added 184,000 jobs to our region. So this bar was down 177,000. These 2 add up to 184,000. So we just finally got back to where we were at in 2019. So if you kind of look at the same sort of layout, that now in this case, the darker orange is the observed, and then the lighter orange is the forecasted job growth. We're forecasting jobs out to 2050 be about 3.2 million jobs in the region. You can see where we're kind of at. I like to highlight to people, you all being economic development folks kind of see the V-shaped. We heard a lot early in the pandemic whether the impacts of the recession would be a V-shaped or not. You can see a rapid drop and much back to a rapid increase. You kind of are tracking where the line is at. We're right basically at where we're at in 2019, but of course we were forecasting that we would continue to grow jobs. And so you can imagine we're about a year behind where we originally forecasted. Now, having said that, we forecast out, you see this line is straight. We know cycles, right? You have the ups and you have the downs, and in the end, the ups and downs kind of work their way out to kind of a rough line. But you can kind of see, despite a global pandemic, we're actually pretty close to where we are at in terms of our job forecast by now. But not all job sectors have fully recovered. And these bars, and you can look at them later and you'll have the links to the slides as well. You can kind of see them, but I just went with the kind of the 10 high level job sectors that you can get from the QCW data. And if you look, certain sectors are up. And in this case, it's July 2019 compared to July 2022. So you can see construction, wherever the bar in 22 is higher, it's growth over where we're at pre-pandemic. So you can see the construction, education, health services. This one is almost, I don't know how your eyes see it, this 2022 bar slightly higher, but you can see, and I would point out leisure and hospitality as an example. It's been one of the hardest hit job sectors as a result of the pandemic, and it's still not back to where it was at in 2019, despite the fact it's grown quite a bit. If we were to have looked at this bar a year ago, it was below 150,000 jobs. So we've had pretty strong job growth even in the last year, but we are still a good 50,000 jobs below where we are at in 2019. Labor force is a big issue here in trying to fill those jobs. And you can also see a big impact on manufacturing, where we still in 2022 are down below where we're at in 2019. Whereas you can look and see between the Amazons and the Microsofts are kind of in between in these kind of 2 sectors here. And so you got the professional business services and information, definitely some of the larger growing sectors as well. Probably not too much of a surprise. Unemployment rate is back down to pre-pandemic levels. So where you're at the end of this bar here, we are at a little under 3.3% unemployment rate. So we're well under a 4% unemployment rate. See, really for a good 5-6 years, the region had been below a 5% unemployment rate in the region. And you can see once again that impact of the recession, the pandemic. In the spring of 2020, it jumped to almost 18%. And it took about a year for it to get back down below 5%, but you can see the kind of steady decline back to, like I said, this is about 3.3% unemployment rate for the region as of June of 2022. And probably the last sort of interesting one, and I'll caveat this because the data is still continuing to change. So I took a snapshot. This is from census data in 2010, 2015, and 2020, and you can see kind of the overall work from home percentages. And the interesting one is if you just kind of look between 2010 and 2020, work from home doubled. It went from 5% to 10%. But this is region, this is ACS information, census information that's out. We track this information through a variety of other sources, and it continues to go up and down. And it really, really, really varies by your job sector. I would use an example just in an organization like ours. Several of us are in the office today. Far more of us are working from home today. And so we have a pretty strong continued work from home group here. And so you can kind of see that continuing. And with that, that's kind of my last set of intro slides into the things that are going on. So Liz, I'm happy to turn it over to.
So who has control of is the host? Because Mayor Pro Tem, actually he's not, Councilmember Mayhew has his hand up.
Jason has the
No,
panelist control.
sorry, let me. Sorry, my computer was occupied doing the projecting there.
There you go.
All right, so that was the video.
Yeah.
If you want to.
Yeah. Did anybody have any questions about that segment?
Mayhew.
Oh, Mayhew? Jason?
I promoted him a panelist, so he can certainly unmute if he.
Just for clarity, what's the exact scope of the region that's being discussed in those slides?
It would be the PSRC region, which would be the 4-county, King, Pierce, Snoqualmie, and Kitsap is what they refer to.
Thanks.
Any further questions about that before we bring in our live speaker? So
How frequently is that data updated?
It is updated monthly, I believe, but for trend purposes, PSRC, is, as you saw, shows it on an annual, that July to July basis, just to get better trend lines, I guess you could say, on it.
Random question. Why do they do July versus January?
I don't know.
do you know?
Why not?
I believe it takes out seasonality, because if you do December, the retail numbers would be higher, artificially higher. So July is probably a more representative even, yeah. Especially when you're talking about trades like construction, where they tend to be seasonal, or fishing, or other agricultural things. July would probably be more representative.
Well, and maybe even with relocation for jobs settling out in February and March could be part of it too.
Great. If there are no other questions, we have a guest speaker, Jason from PSRC. He's an Economic Development Program Manager, and he's going to be leading us through the slides that involve the city of Snoqualmie. And so this is primarily data that comes from the census, but then he'll also be moving into a recently published PSRC guidance document on economic development, which will specifically be useful when we go in and take a look at those goals and policies that Jason was talking about in his staff memo. So without further ado, Jason, are you ready?
I'm ready. Excuse me. I'm ready, and hopefully you can hear me. And then I'm going to share some slides that hopefully you'll be able to see.
How do you say your last name, Jason?
Thibodeau.
Thibodeau. Thank you.
How are we looking? Are we looking good here?
Looks great.
Okay, great. Well, good morning, Jason Thibodeau, PSRC. It's interesting to sit and it always throws me off to have another Jason in the room. I perk up whenever somebody says the name. So nice to have another Jason in the room here. And it sounds like you're off to a really great start. We facilitated a passport session. You got to see some data from there. Emily mentioned two things that I'm going to cover. One, a high-level overview of the element guide, the economic development element guide. So talking about the policy areas that our reviewers look at when we're reviewing comprehensive plans, and then also building off of the regional data that Craig mentioned. I got a little bit of data for Snoqualmie itself, which I think is really helpful in thinking about planning for and working on the policies related to your local economic development plans. As well as, pointing you to the element guide, which has a lot more data resources, depending on the policy areas you're talking about, some strategies to get more data, some places that you can look at and dig into if you're interested in doing that based upon your policy conversations. So I think you all know this. Jason gave a little bit of an overview. I think you all know what a comprehensive plan is, all the different elements that are in there. They're due at the end of 2024. Lots of jurisdictions are starting that process to see where they're at right now, what their comp plan policies look like now, what things can be carried forward, what conversations and data needs to be looked at, and what areas of focus you might have as far as updating them and modifying them. And this used to be an 8-year cycle. It's on a 10-year cycle now, which is really great. Another thing for us, we're a 4-county region. All 4 of our counties are now on the same update schedule, which is really great for us. We're working to be as helpful as possible with local jurisdictions, with data, policy assistance, trainings like this to be able to get you what you need to be able to update those policies. So I will talk just very briefly about Vision. Vision 2050 is the region's plan for growth and sets the regional policies that inform the local comp plans. They're referred to as MPPs, multi-county planning policies. So the region comes together at PSRC through our Growth Management Policy Board, discusses and sets regional 4-county policies that get carried down into the county level policies that get carried down into local policies. It also contains a regional growth strategy, which defines the roles that different types of places in the region play in accommodating that anticipated growth. State level, they do statewide projections for growth, and then there's this allocation process that goes down county and jurisdiction for us to be able to plan to accommodate the folks that are going to be moving here. And there continues to be a lot of those people that continue to grow. Yes, we've got kind of natural growth that happens, but a lot of our growth is really accommodating those that come from other places around the world that want to come and live here and work here. So the vision economy goal is that the region has a prospering and sustainable regional economy by supporting businesses and job creation, investing in all people and their health, sustaining environmental quality, and creating great central places, diverse communities, and high quality of life. There's a lot packed in there. The economy section of Vision, I think more so than others, just brings a lot of different things together. Our perspective on economic development and our economic sustainability and our economic health there includes lots of things: businesses, people, quality of life, the environment, et cetera. And so this is it's a bit of a laundry list, but it captures a lot of the specific policies that are laid out Envision, and the MPPs. So transitioning to the econ element, we have at PSRC a plan review manual, and this is kind of a cheat sheet for what our reviewers are going to be looking at when reviewing comprehensive plans. For each section in the comp plan, it provides a checklist for what reviewers are looking for during the plan review process. And I took a snapshot directly out of that. Here are the 7 areas of review for the economy element. It's an eye test here. It's more of an example of how we just sort of snipped that out. But really, we took those 7 areas that you see here, the plan review manual topics, and we use those to develop an economic development element guide. So each of those 7 areas I'm going to talk about very briefly. The element guide provides more information about these, including context on the regional policies that are in there, some policy considerations, some things to think about at the local level when you're working on your policies, some example local policies that could be helpful. In specific instances, we are also available to do some research and to help if you've got specific policy questions, if you've got a community and technical college, if you've got a specific type of industrial area, we can help connect your questions into some other policies across all the comprehensive plans that we have on the books right now. And then, as I mentioned before, there's useful data in there. Craig talked about some regional data. This is more focused on when you're thinking about your plans and your policies, what are some things that you can look at in order to help inform those? So I'm going to briefly cover each of the 7 policy areas and then talk about some of that Snoqualmie data, some additional resources, and then we can take some questions and identify some follow-ups. So the first policy area in Vision in the element guide is to identify and enhance industry clusters, including those recognized in the regional economic strategy that provide goods and services for export. So the region has several key industries that export goods and services to other regions. These are the things that bring dollars into our region and help sustain our regional economy. We also have a lot of jobs that are focused on providing goods and services to the local population as well. But those exports, the import of the dollars from other parts of the region is really what drives the growth and sustainability of our economy. And of course, from a local level, tapping into an existing regional industry concentration or a regional supply chain can be very useful and helpful in you meeting your local economic development goals. So some things to think about at the local level: you have critical industrial areas or airports. Are you connected into local supply chains that require efficient movement of materials and products through the region, or people throughout the region if you're, maybe have a local economy that's focused on tourism? There's a lot of success in leveraging partners beyond your local government. Trade organizations, educational institutions, major employers can be partners to help identify goals, to help be part of the process to implement. And then I'd also encourage you not only to look at the regional economic strategy, which identifies a lot of those regional industries and some regional goals, but you've got county-specific economic development plans as well. Those can help inform your local goal setting. So the second area for focus is focusing retention and recruitment efforts and activities to foster a positive business climate and diversify employment opportunities by specifically targeting certain groups. And I won't go through another area of a laundry list, but really what this comes down to is that local jurisdictions often have goals for more jobs. Sometimes they have goals for specific types of jobs, limited resources and what we can do. So the idea is figure out really what you want to target, what types of jobs, what types of businesses, what types of business owners, and really focus in your efforts on that. Now, Vision 2050 calls for the support of locally owned businesses, women and minority owned businesses, startup companies. It calls for increased attention to retaining and expanding environmentally sustainable industries in the region. So technologies and services that are developed not just for us here in the region, but for export around the world. And of course, targeting living wage jobs. If you're trying to get jobs, focus on the ones that are really going to have the most impact for your local community. So some local considerations there. Those recruitment and retention activities, some jurisdictions do that directly. Larger jurisdictions have often a larger, economic development program and economic development staff, but most jurisdictions look to support from other local organizations that they can partner with, the economic development organizations across each of our counties, local chambers of commerce. Aligning efforts with other economic goals. So, if you're identifying, targets for types of businesses, of course, you should target your recruitment and retention and expansion efforts to align with that. And then a lot of jurisdictions think about branding and marketing, hiring policies, and strategic partnerships that could be used to help set the policies and also to help meet the goals that are in those policies. So for the third policy area, it's promoting strategies and policies that expand access to opportunity and remove barriers for economically disconnected communities. Vision calls for local plans to expand access to opportunity and advance racial equity throughout economic policies. And of course, access to opportunity plays a significant role in life outcomes. And you're going to be the experts on the people, the places in your community that would really drive that. Some conversations could be facilitated between you and your local business owners, your local population, about what those target areas should be. We also have available some opportunity mapping tools that can help identify existing disparities and help you evaluate planning decisions. So we've got an opportunity mapping tool that has a bunch of different factors, geographic, demographic, that can help you identify some particular places or particular people. So at the local level, educational policies are a really important way to help align with the economic goals and help meet and promote opportunity for your communities. Identifying those at-need populations and connecting them with educational opportunities can be a great way to do that. Targeting infrastructure investments, if you've identified areas in your community that are most disconnected from economic opportunity. And then also being thoughtful about how you're spending public funding, and including government contracting, et cetera, that can help meet some of your economic development goals, connect local businesses that meet some of your goal criteria into some broader opportunities. Policy area number 4, addressing and preventing physical, economic, and cultural displacement of existing businesses that may result from redevelopment and market pressure. And this is going to be different throughout, the challenges are different throughout our different populations, but Vision recognizes that rising land values and population and job growth continue to contribute to a commercial displacement crisis. As Craig mentioned, as a region, we're way behind on the housing that we need to build, in the lack of housing, in the increasing prices for housing is causing other challenges, is causing loss of our commercial spaces as those pressures for more housing come in. So we have businesses getting priced out of the real estate markets. We got housing that's encroaching on some of our commercial and potentially industrial areas. And at the end of the day, it's the small business owners, it's those local sort of unique businesses that are often, the ones that get the short end of the stick. They're sort of on the, they lose out to the higher price, the housing opportunities, housing development, and also larger companies. So some things to think about at the local level: zoning codes. You can create size restricted districts that preserve those smaller commercial spaces, preserve them for commercial uses versus housing. If you're talking about some business areas, retail areas that you want to help sustain and maintain, subsidizing expenses such as streetscapes and facade improvements through loans and matching programs can really help solidify those local businesses, bring more interest into those areas. And then for businesses that aren't going to work out in the spaces that they're in for various reasons? Do you have relocation assistance? Can you provide assistance to these local businesses to keep them in a community, maybe in a different space, a more affordable space that might be more appropriate to them? And finally here, and policies and initiatives should be paired with business outreach, technical assistance, and education efforts. And again, working with your local businesses and identifying what their needs are can really help inform what types of assistance you would like to provide, and also how best to get connected with those that need that assistance the most. For policy area number 5, develop a range of employment opportunities to create a closer balance between jobs and housing. Vision 2050 and the regional growth strategy strive to achieve an improved jobs housing balance. It's extremely difficult to do that, even if you've got numbers that line up, number of jobs, number of housing units. I'm going to talk about the local data in a second, which I find to be really informative, especially in a world of COVID, where people are working from home more, about some considerations for that. Of course, providing a better balance provides lots of community benefits, reducing traffic congestion, air emissions, commute times for commuters, increasing time with local families, more time at local businesses, shops, and restaurants. So there's lots of reasons why we want to do that. In your housing element, of course, you're looking to address your housing needs for workers. But I would encourage you to be thoughtful in your economic development element to provide, jobs for working residents. And again, that's something I'm going to touch into on a minute. You've got jobs in your community that are filled with people that are both from your community and other places, but you got a lot of workers in your community and as well. And that pool of labor can be really, it can help inform what you want your economic development goals to be. What jobs in your community could you expand to help match those workers that you already have in the region? So policies and programs here should operate in tandem with those policies in the housing element. Again, seeking to expand employment opportunities for current residents, your existing pool of people that are already interested in invested in your community. Excuse me. I have a household cold here. Policy area number 6, promote environmentally and socially responsible business practices, especially those addressing climate change, resilience, and improved health outcomes. So Vision 2050 and the Regional Economic Strategy both acknowledge that our region's natural environment is a unique asset that attracts people to the region. People want to live here because of the natural environment and the amenities that we have. It also recognizes the impacts of climate change on the economy, and promoting healthy, resilient, environmental, and strong communities is a key to our economic success. And most importantly, from an economic development perspective, there's a lot of effort in the state and in the region to establish those emerging industries focused on resilience and climate change. So there's investments being done at the state level through the Department of Commerce. We're looking to grow those industries in the region. So, it's an opportunity to get in line and kind of ride in the wake of some of those efforts. If we're interested in growing certain types of industries in the region, and we've got money and investment and organizations that are working to do that, it's just an opportunity for a local jurisdiction to maybe line up their economic development goals in an area that other people are working on and promoting at the same time. So some local considerations here. Prioritizing environmental and social responsibility to build more sustainability into your economy. Tapping into the natural environment as an economic asset. Many jurisdictions, take advantage of the surrounding natural environment, the opportunities for recreation, hiking, et cetera. In Snoqualmie, you've got some great assets there, and I'm sure that bringing tourists in from either outside of the region or from the Seattle and other parts of the region to come in is a key element to how you think about your economic success. And then finally, number 7, supporting, recognizing, and empowering the contributions of the region's culturally and ethnically diverse communities, institutions, and native tribes. So Vision 2050 recognizes that our cultural and ethnically diverse communities contribute to vibrant local economies. This is another area where you're going to know best about the assets that you have, the communities that you have. At the end of the day, oftentimes, opportunities and resources are not allocated equitably. And so a consideration would be, your local historical and cultural context. How do you align your economic development plans to recognize, preserve, and empower those cultural and ethnic communities, partnering with organizations on cultural events, just ways to integrate more activity and interest with different communities in your economy to create more interest and economic opportunity. So outreach to communities, setting intentional goals and policies, working to create pathways for under-resourced communities, highlighting those communities through events and program funding, et cetera. So it's a lot to cover. There's a lot more in the economic development element, discussing both those policy considerations, as well as some more interesting data points to look at. One of the things that I'm a big fan of, the census has an on the map tool where you can look at inflow and outflow for a community. Oftentimes a local community, a local jurisdiction will look at the jobs they have and think about that as their economic base. So what this shows here is a match between jobs located in a community and workers that are located in a community, regardless of where they work. So this is just focused on Snoqualmie. And what this shows is that on any given day, you've got about 4,500 workers that are coming into Snoqualmie to work, that live other places, that come in and work in Snoqualmie. You've got about 600 folks that live in Snoqualmie that also work in Snoqualmie. And then you've got 5,900 folks that live in Snoqualmie that work other places. So both of these sets of folks, both of these sets of things, I believe are a good recognition of your local economy. It's not just the number of jobs. It's not just the, over 5,000 jobs that you have in Snoqualmie, but it's the more than 6,000 workers that are tied to your community. And to dig into that a little bit more, and to give them a little more perspective on some things to consider, we've got side by side here the number of workers that live in Snoqualmie, the number of jobs in Snoqualmie. And yes, there's some matching, but the difference here can be illustrative of where some of those opportunities are. So the top 3 worker exports are in information, or in professional, scientific, and technical services, or in retail. And we'll just take information as an example. You got just over 300 jobs in Snoqualmie, but you got about 850 workers. Now, in pre-COVID times, most of those workers would be leaving Snoqualmie on a daily basis to go work some other place. I can't tell you how many there are staying part-time, full-time, working from home. But that can be an economic opportunity for you to think about. What are the goods and services that those folks, are they shopping more at grocery stores? Are there more, recreational opportunities, retail opportunities, opportunities for lunch? If you're thinking about identifying more job locations, recruiting companies, recognizing the huge worker asset that you have in your communities can be helpful in having those discussions and helpful in doing that recruiting. And then the flip side too, the top 3 net worker imports. So the areas where you're importing the most workers on a regular basis to fill jobs in your community around educational services, manufacturing, and accommodation and food services. And those are really areas that can help inform you when you're talking about your housing goals. So where are you importing workers? Is there a way to help align new housing opportunities to, worker housing that you're building because of the workers that you already know that you have in your community that are working from other places. And this on the map tool, there's a lot more you can look at. You can look at distance, you can look at direction, so you can get a better sense of how far folks are coming or going when they're commuting. And that can be a helpful way for you to think about not only your housing policies, but also your economic development policies. So switching over to resources, we got a lot of resources. There's a couple that I talked about. There's the plan review manual, which you can see the checklist. I'm somebody, how am I going to be graded? What are the specific things that you're going to be looking for? So we got a really good resource for that. The economic development element guide, which I talked about, more detail about the policy areas that I talked about, more specific. As I was running through the slides, you could see on the right-hand side some specific data points that can be helpful. There's more information about how they can be helpful and where you can find that data in that guide. And the regional economic strategy, if you want a better sense of what we've identified as those regional key export industries, there's a lot of goals and strategies in there that talk about how we want to get to sustaining our economy, growing our economy. And this can be helpful for you to identify some areas where, hey, folks are already working on this. There's some key partners. If this is where there's movement, maybe there's some opportunity for us to align with that. And then we did a session. The other Jason mentioned this at the beginning. We're doing a Passport to 2044 series that covers both the comprehensive plan update and any topic that you might be interested in within there. We did one on the economic development element. You saw a little snippet of that from Craig at the beginning, but it goes into a little bit more detail. But knowing that I've been here and having these conversations, I would encourage you maybe to just jump right to that element guide if you're interested in continuing the work and continuing the conversations. Is that sorry, that's a duplicate slide. I added one. So going forward, I'm a good contact for economic development element questions. If you've got questions about policy, if you've got questions about data, if you have broader questions about the comprehensive plan update process and the review process at PSRC, Liz Underwood Boltman will probably be the best person. But if you want to reach out to me, if I can't answer your question, I can happily connect you with anybody on our staff that would be the best person to talk about. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and see if we have any questions or comments, or maybe identifying some next steps where I can work to be helpful for you during your process.
Quick question for you, Emily. With this happening, do we know our capacities for sewer and water? So we keep this in mind when we're doing this?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a whole nother element just on capital facilities and utilities. So we'll be, pouring through the water and sewer comprehensive plans and understanding how those fit with our business needs and all the other elements in the comprehensive plan.
Do we know how close we are to capacity and how, if we're going to have to build additional for what the county wants us to add more housing?
Yeah, I mean, there's likely some issues there for us to address with water. We've talked about that, knowing that that's a limited resource, and I believe they're still working on getting, is that right, Jason, getting the water comprehensive plan approved?
So we are relatively close on under our current water rights and also how we operate the water system. We are, so as the director was mentioning, we do have a water system plan, which is getting close to getting finalized. That identifies some near-term and longer-term strategies the city would undertake with regard to water supply. Some of it is about more efficient use of the current supplies. Some of it is about taking some other strategies in how we manage our water rights throughout the year to be able to have more water supply available to use. On the sewer side, we are generally in good shape. We're beginning to undertake some pretty substantial expansions of the wastewater treatment plant. Some of it's related to the recent agreement with the Snoqualmie tribe for sewer service there, and other parts of it are development related. So sewer capacity is less of an issue overall than water supply, but they are at the end of the day relatively tied together we move forward. So it's something we'll definitely be addressing, as Emily mentioned, in the capital facilities and utilities element of the comprehensive plan.
And one last thing, what about land? Do we have more spots to even build?
Well, we do have an entire, what we call PAA, potential annexation area, that's been designated as part of PSRC and the Department of Commerce, and that is our growth and expansion area. But it doesn't preclude other opportunities that the county is working on right now. So there might be some opportunities even at the diverging diamond area for additional property.
Okay, so the numbers are from 2019, so is that the 2020 census information then? Or is there anything more current from the 20 numbers?
Yeah, that's the most current that they have published. And so, yes, most importantly, things have changed since then in terms of jobs, in terms of workers. But I think at the macro level, it should spark just an understanding that a lot of a big consideration is make sure you're thinking about the workers that are in the community that are working other places as an economic asset, and they represent kind of the majority of the workers in both directions, right? So you're not going to get a precise look by looking back to 2019, but just recognizing as a whole that most of the jobs you have in your community are filled by folks from the outside. Most of the workers that you have in your community are working that have work locations that are outside your community, though they may be working a lot from home at the same time. So that there are two different populations that should be part of those conversations regarding housing, economic policies. And I can work with Emily too to kind of dig in a little bit more. There's a lot more data behind that to help get a little more detail about what those populations are, what those industries are, that could be helpful in your future conversations.
Thank you. I think the listing of industries that you had showing what the workers are working in and what the jobs are in Snoqualmie was very helpful, and I didn't see that in our packet. So if we can include a copy of that, that'd be great.
Yeah, Jason, would we be able to get a copy of your presentation?
Oh, absolutely. Yep. I'll shoot you a copy right after the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And just one other thing that I've noticed that we're having a little bit of an issue with, King County only goes by census. And we do have a population here that is not counted for, and that is our illegal immigrants that work in our farms. And I don't know how, Jennifer, how to get those correct numbers. I have done an unofficial, just trying to figure that out. And what I'm hearing from schools and stuff, we've got about 250 kids that are here that are illegal immigrants, and then about 700 in the Falls City area. And those are not accounted for and not been taken care of either. And I just want to mention that, just so when we do this, that we don't forget about those people.
Jason, there's two things that I would be interested in kind of a deeper understanding on, if you have thoughts on how to get some of that information. One is the kind of trends over time of some of these numbers, in terms of if we are seeing areas where the distribution of whether it's inflows or outflows, or the kind of distribution of industries, like if we're seeing indications that something's on a downward or upward trend, that we would want to think about how to account for. And then the second would be, and this one's probably a little trickier, but trying to establish the correlation of some of these factors with the things that the EDC might want to advise on in terms of the income for the city, attractiveness of our region for potential business sectors, things like that.
Yeah, for the first one, we can go back from the most recent data, and you can look at those trends and see the shifts over time. What I would say related to that, because this has been something even pre-COVID that I look at, is that most unless you're outside of like a city of Seattle or Redmond, most of our smaller, medium-sized cities have that similar makeup where you've got approximately the same number of jobs and workers, but there's a huge shift in as far as people coming in and people going out. But if you're interested in looking at those trends over some periods pre-2019, the data is available to do that. The other thing that we've done more analysis on are those teleworking trends, and that's something we've had to actually modify our. We do travel surveys that help with our modeling, and we've had to modify how we ask those questions because in the past it was, do you work from home? Do you work in an office? And that was really it. And now there's a large number of people that are doing a bit of both. So we know that trend is happening. So that's one thing that the data is not really going to tell us, those traditional data sources. We know where jobs are located and we know where people are, but there's no data source that can accurately tell us how many days is that worker working at home versus where they're working in the office. It's not how any of our systems are set up. So that's going to require a little bit more kind of local understanding, local conversations to identify where those workers are. And then the second question, I'm not sure I really caught the correlation of factors. So it sounds like just different kind of competitiveness drivers that you might be looking at the local level and how those impact your local budgets?
Potentially, yeah. I mean, I guess taking a stab at it, probably be a comparative analysis to similarly sized regions to understand how the some of these individual factors influence others.
Yeah, and that's probably a lot more than we can kind of figure out or dig into right now, but maybe I can just tag that for something that I can work with Emily on. We can kind of dig into that a little bit and see what we can find as far as peer regions or other types of research or information that we could help identify.
How accessible is the raw data? Like if this is something that, say, I wanted to slice and dice, could I?
Yeah, so we've got the tool that I've used to show here for the inflow outflow. That's just I go to the census website and work on it and pull it from there. And there's different ways to slice and dice it. I believe you can download the raw data as well. That's usually a little bit beyond me. I just use their interfaces there and kind of start to do some analysis that way. And then we have employment data, just employment data on that side at PSRC, which we have broken down at the jurisdictional level. So we have that available if you want to look at that as well.
Thank you.
James, I see your hand, your virtual hand up.
Yes. No, I just want to make a comment. I think that last series of questions is just tremendously important. And, the difference in Snoqualmie versus just 3 years ago, just historically, by the way, we've always sort of gone after this using that census website. It's fantastic. It's a little bit old school, but it really is fantastic. You can slice and dice a lot there and get to some pretty good answers. But just 3 years ago, the number of people that worked and lived in Snoqualmie, their jobs and their work were both in Snoqualmie, was in the hundreds. As you saw from the numbers here, that's in the thousands now. That's a massive change. Yeah, things have changed during COVID, but what does it mean to us when we think about economic development and so on? I think it's just a fantastic question for Snoqualmie. What does it really mean if we have a lot more people, which is what those numbers are telling us, that are here all day long? I think Jason even mentioned the notion of who's eating lunch here and things like that. I think it's sort of really worth digging into and may tell us a lot about things we should be thinking about. So I think you guys are on the great track. Just wanted to add in that perspective from just a few years ago.
Yeah, I think it's hard to observe in the same way. You go to traditional employment centers like downtown Seattle, things have not returned. You realize that there's a negative economic impact by not having those workers there, having people there on the street on a regular basis. Well, that has gone somewhere. That potential for economic benefit has gone somewhere. And it may be sitting in home offices in Snoqualmie right now as an untapped resource. And I don't think any of us know how best to take advantage of that, but it's floating out there somewhere and I guess that's I think and that's what I've been at. It's an economic opportunity for communities like yours to tap into. Well, thank you. Oh, Rob, one more hand popped up.
Thank you again, Jason. Oh, now I get my camera.
That's okay. You can ask, even if we look at the ceiling.
So one of the challenges with the US Census is they haven't changed how they assess the workforce population by income. Top tiers, $3,333 a month. And we know that if you make that kind of money, you could afford $1,000 in rent a month, which it's not incredibly helpful. We've got about 77% of our population that falls into that category. Are there resources that we have through PSRC to understand that? Because it's really not as useful as it could be if we knew more about incomes on both people who work outside of the area as well as those inbound jobs too, because there's obviously a mismatch between incomes and housing affordability.
Yeah, I can look into that. One of the things that I know that I haven't fully explored, we've released a community profiles interface at PSRC where we've aggregated a bunch of different data sources, and you can pull down your jurisdiction, you can see population, jobs, income, et cetera. I'd be curious to see whether if we do have better information, it would be integrated into that system. I haven't done a side by side. But sort of in a broader comment, always frustrations with data. It kind of tells you enough to want to know more, but not enough to be able to really give you a super accurate set of information for you to make your policies decisions on. But I'll work with Emily. We can take a look at those community profiles, check out whether there's better and more accurate income breakdowns or just different categories maybe that could be helpful.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Great to talk to you. Great to just talk to you more about Snoqualmie, what's going on there. Emily and I have been in touch setting up for this meeting. We'll continue to work together. If you've got questions or there's information that you're looking for that could be helpful, Emily and I can work together and see what we can do. So looking forward to it. And thanks again for having me.
Thank you.
Jason. Thank you.
Nice presentation, Jason. Thank you so much.
So, Emily, I believe it's you next for the 2023 work program, and then we have our guests.
Sure, yeah, just one question, Chair. It may be such that one of our guest speakers from the police chief might have a conflict and might need to go early. Is that the case, Chief Perry? Oh, okay.
At this meeting, so I'm okay.
Yeah. Well, why don't we allow our guests to speak and then move the discussion?
Sure, that would be fine.
Okay. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you. I am Jen Kirk, and I am the Executive Director of Reclaim, which is the first time I've actually said that in person at a presentation. We just recently rebranded. So I'll just kind of keep it casual, tell you some things about our agency, and then open it up to discussion, bring up Chief Phipps if people have questions for him also. So we were historically Snoqualmie Valley Shelter Services. We have been providing shelter to our community for 10 years now. December 23rd was our anniversary of serving the Valley. Started out in North Bend. We were historically a winter-only emergency shelter, nighttime response. Different churches and fraternal organizations hosted us throughout those winter months. In 2017, we opened a daytime resource center also that was located across the street where our shelter currently is. And then from there, we transitioned in November of 2022, year-round 24/7 in response to COVID and a bunch of public funding that came our way. The New King County Regional Homelessness Authority focused a lot of effort on making sure that shelters were able to expand and not just do the kind of lower bar emergency nighttime response to that life-saving shelter. So we have always served all genders and we serve families also. We are not licensed to serve unaccompanied minors, so we transition them if they come to us over to Friends of Youth in the hopes that they have some beds. As you know, through COVID, all of us had to de-intensify our shelters in order to provide that 6-foot spacing. We now have walls separating out our beds and our shelter to try to keep people safe. And so those reduced down the numbers of beds available. And so we have continued to see, not just from the economic side of people losing jobs through COVID, but because of the de-intensified shelters, we have continued to see a rise in unsheltered homelessness, people not being able to access any type of indoor shelter at all. We have also seen since November of 2020, when we went 24/7, 32% of the people that we have served were new to homelessness when they came to us. That has grown exponentially. So we have we're talking a lot as an agency. Historically, we have served people that chronically homeless folks. When we first started out, there were a lot of people that had been living outdoors in our communities, out in the woods, out by Mount Si, wherever it might be, for many, sometimes decades. So bringing them into shelter, it's a different service model. As Kelly can speak to, that used to run the food bank, it's a very different service model than serving the needs of people that are just entering homelessness. It is extremely traumatic. Part of the reason why we rebranded was to remove the word shelter from our agency altogether, but also because we're providing so many more services. So as an agency, as a board, we're talking about trying to offer different service levels when it comes to the case management side. How do we scoop those brand new folks up and get them into housing when there's no housing available to them? How do we keep them from slipping into the abyss that is chronic homelessness in our area, right, in King County, throughout the country? It's a different mental strain on people. We see slips in mental health, behavioral health across the board as people start to slip further and further into kind of that hopelessness, even when they're surrounded by agencies like ours that are actually supporting them in that process. So we will be talking to Snoqualmie and North Bend and other areas, communities about we have for this next year and into 2024 also, kind of in response to that. Lack of affordable housing is a huge issue. The King County Regional Homelessness Authority pushed emergency housing vouchers to nearly all of us service providers throughout their entire county this last year, and we were issued quite a few of those vouchers that we were able to issue to our folks. First time that anything like that has ever come through a nonprofit social service agency to push to clients. Usually it goes straight to clients, and in 10 years of doing this job prior to those vouchers, I can name maybe 3 people that I ever knew in this valley that came up on the lottery for the King County Housing Authority. So it was a big shift. The big issue that we had was we could not find housing in the valley for them. Not one of those vouchers was used in our own community, in the community of the people that received those vouchers. And trying to work with our folks to leave their community that they've lived in for generations can feel really impossible. We had 3 clients that lost their voucher. We extended it, extended it again, and after that 3rd extension, they could not be extended out again, and they lost their housing voucher because they were not able to make the decision to actually leave this community. So they have chosen to remain in a shelter or in our motel voucher program, or even living outdoors if we don't have space for them, as opposed to leaving their own community to find it somewhere else. So that was really heartbreaking. I really hope that more vouchers are pushed out and we have an opportunity to continue to kind of try to talk people into even going to Issaquah is a huge ask for a lot of our folks. So, and then to talk just briefly, we are serving upwards of 60 people a night through 3 different programs. So we have our shelter across the street that is 24/7, year-round, serves adult singles now. We used to serve men, women, and family all in one location. So now we have an adult singles shelter. We have a big block of motel vouchers that are mostly funded right now through King County Regional Homelessness Authority. And we prioritize families and couples, but we also partner same gender singles into rooms. And all of our vouchers, aside from one in Bellevue, where we're housing some war refugees from Ukraine right now, all the rest of our vouchers are being used out in the valley here, all in North Bend, obviously. Just economically, we need to be able to rent rooms that we can afford, and the hotel up on the ridge is too expensive for our program. And then I'll just talk briefly about our relationship with Snoqualmie Police. We have a very unique relationship with our police department that we are really proud of. I don't ever talk to any other executive directors of other shelters that have that same relationship with their police department, and we're so proud of that. So we depend on Snoqualmie police officers for emergency response, for crisis response. Having their new mental health professional, Stephanie, on site has been amazing. We had a pretty major crisis situation towards the end of November with one of our clients in the middle of the night, and she was able to come in and actually get him involuntarily committed, which if any of you have ever either experienced that with family members or worked in that realm, it is nearly impossible to get that done. So she's been a huge help. But we also, Snoqualmie Police, have lived out here for years. Many of them went to Mount Si, grew up here, know the community, they know our folks. And so historically, if they have time, we have kind of depended on them to kind of come down and help us navigate some conversations with our folks if we're trying to keep them in shelter or we're needing to exit them for a period of time. And so we've been in contact with Snoqualmie Police. We had a meeting with the new captain, Brian Lynch, recently about like, how is this landing with the police department? We historically, we were that nighttime only shelter. And now we're around all the time. And the police department, like everybody, has gone through a lot of issues with staffing, lower staffing levels, a lot of transition through COVID, and then the new mandates that are placed on the police department. So we're in open conversation with them about like, how is this and how is this relationship? And so far we're receiving really good feedback. So we'll just continue to ebb and flow as the police department and our other providers out here kind of need us to do. So I don't know, do you want to speak to that at all, Terry?
I think you just gave my presentation. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
That's amazing to
Sorry
sit
for
back there.
micromanaging that.
No, that's amazing to sit back there and listen to you, because I was actually going to say that too. It is not the norm that you have the law enforcement in that community that works so well with the services that Reclaim gives to our community. And so, yeah, it's amazing. So she did talk about the mental health professional, and I'm not sure if it's the same one, but I just got an email from and this is the kind of work that is going to impact this community tremendously. And it's going to make us, we're talking about the quality of life and how does law enforcement, what we do, what I do, impact what, this is the first time I've been before EDC. And in reality, it's a big part, I think, of what we do. It's actually kind of what you got to do is the quality of life. That's why people come to this community. That's why businesses come to this community. We have the safest community, one of the safest communities, if not the safest, in the state of Washington. We are going through some issues, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But that's a big part of why we're here. I continually hear that. They come here for the school district. They come here. Thank you so much. They come here for the quality of life that this place presents. And I'm one of those that just had to leave this community as well. I had to move over on the other side of 18, and I did that because of the cost of living here and the housing. But I will tell you that when I drive over 18 and I come into this valley, I feel like I'm in a different place. And that's what we have to continue to have this. Even though I'm just on the other side of the mountain, it just seems like so far away that it's like when you come up to Issaquah, and I love Issaquah as well, but when you come up here, it just seems like you're so far away. This place is special and we want to keep it that way. We are dealing with some issues, and Jennifer did touch a little bit about some of the things we're doing. Staffing and hiring, everybody is dealing with that. We are definitely gone through our trials and tribulations as far as staffing, and we still are. We were 10 down, and think about that. We only have 25 out there doing patrol. So if you down to 15 to staff 24 hours a day in 2 communities, sometimes you're out there with 1 or 2. We can't do that, so we utilize overtime to staff. We still have a concept of no call too small. We still abide by that. We'll cherish that, and we're going to, in the future, is to continue to do that. We're doing better with staffing. 2 down, but it does take about a year to get a new on the streets to be able to patrol by themselves. And so we're dealing with those kind of things. Because of the staffing, our cops activities are lower. We haven't been able to do a lot of reasons, COVID and a lot of things, but Coffee with a Cop, simple as that is, that's a great outreach for us to be able to interact with not just the community members, but also the businesses. The businesses love that when we come there and do a Coffee with a Cop. Pretty soon I'm going to think about Pizza with a Cop. No, it doesn't matter what the venue is. It's just the idea is to get us out there and interact with the community. And so we're going to start doing those kind of things as well. As far as the things we're dealing with, it's pretty eye-opening. In 2017, we dealt with 1 use of force in Snoqualmie, 1. That's how great this place is. This year, 16, still great, but we went from 1 to 16. And I'll tell you, in this week alone, in a 12-hour period, we had 3 uses of force. 2 of them were significant. One of them was actually a gentleman who was going through crisis. And in fact, in this call, our mental health professional was there, and she is doing great. But use of force was required in this case because this gentleman tried to disarm our law enforcement officer, tried to take his gun. We just haven't seen that in this community. And so that's what we're dealing with, is that level of crime that's starting to kind of come up here. But it's still way better than most places, way better.
Are you seeing that it's local residents that have been here or people transitioning into our community, or both?
It's been both. Sometimes it's people that are they're just going through our community. The gentleman that tried to take the gun was from this community. I just think that everybody's struggling through crisis, and that's why, thankfully, last night, in fact, North Bend City Council approved unanimously, as well as Snoqualmie, to fund the mental health professional as well. But going back to that, this is the impact that she has had, and it's going to just make us better. And that was that we would embed mental health professional within the police department. And that was kind of a concept that is kind of unique in a way in this community, because most of the time they're outside. They're kind of with the police department, but they are not riding along with the officer. They're there when it's happening. And in this case, it really came to light was we received a call. Actually, a family member called us and said they just received a call from a friend who said she was she wanted to harm herself, self-harm. But they didn't know where she was. She wasn't home. She was out in her car. They had no idea where she was. So they were out looking for her. So we ended up locating her in the valley here. And Stephanie was there. And the thank you letter that I got said basically, in this case, she was able to talk to this person, get this person help. The person was taken to the hospital that night and then released and is following up with services. But they were so thankful that she was there, because if she wasn't there, and this was 10 o'clock at night, this is what's unique. Most mental health professionals that are working out there in these kind of law enforcement connection situations are 8 to 5, Monday through Friday type thing. They're not there at 10 o'clock at night, or they're not there on a Saturday. And she's adjusted her hours to the need of this community. And sometimes it is on a weekend, sometimes it's later at night. And so in this case, she really made a significant impact on somebody's life at 10 o'clock at night. And so, you know, the impact that she's making is amazing. And I don't want to completely make it about her, but it's going to make us better. It's going to make this quality of life better here.
Well, and to your point on, because you guys spoke at the Downtown Merchants, and that's why I wanted you here, is Stephanie, Joelle was extremely appreciative, and some other local businesses, because there was one, I believe it was a gentleman that was affecting our businesses directly, and Stephanie was able to come in and collaboratively get them help.
So there's a lot of things she's doing that a lot of people don't know about. One of them is we've identified the 10 most people that we deal with. I don't want to call them frequent flyers, but it's the people that really we respond to help. They're obviously, it's not just an isolated crisis situation. It's actually a lifestyle that they're just in crisis continually. And so those are the ones we wanted her to really specifically identify and work to help. It helps us too, because instead of going, there's one person in this community we've gone to assist them over 250 times in a year. If we can cut that by 150, that's 150 less responses. But not only that, they're doing better than, you know, so it's a win-win. And so she's worked on that. She's also internally worked. She's going to help us. She's gone to hostage, believe it or not, hostage negotiation training we sent her to, because she's got the ability and the training experience to deal with people in crisis. I've been to hostage negotiating class taught by the FBI. I'm nowhere near what she can do. And so she's willing and has a personality to do that. And so, you know, it's not just the mental health aspect of it. She's going to help us out in hostage negotiations, crisis negotiations, de-escalation. She's going to be doing a training center to training for de-escalation. She's going to help our officers internally to do training for de-escalation. So she's helping us in those manners as well. I'm not, if you have any questions about health, I'll go on forever on that, but as you can tell. I did want to go just over some of the basic stuff that you might be interested in, and that's the level and the numbers of thefts and car prowls that we have in this community. We typically get about 80 to 100 car prowls in this community. This year we had 187. And so though the number doesn't seem that bad, depending on what you're referencing it to, it's still about a 65% increase of what we normally have. And it's, if you go back to 20, it's about an 85% increase of what we used to deal with. Population hasn't grown a whole lot. It's just the situations that we're dealing with right now in the environment are really impacting what we do. And so not only the use of force, but also car prowls and thefts. Thefts has almost got to a point where we're not even contacted anymore. When a business gets, somebody comes in and literally, the fire chief was telling me a couple nights ago, he was literally in one of our local businesses, and somebody came in and just started loading a bag full and walked out with that bag full. We were never called on that. We were on another one where we got the person in custody, but there's a lot of them where we're not even contacted. It's kind of the norm for some of the businesses at the outlet mall in North Bend, because they just, I don't know if they're, you know, with the police reform laws that were enacted a couple of years ago that really handcuffed us from doing some of the work that we did before those legislative restrictions were put in place. But I'm working on that to get some of those changed. So, and so is our mayor. Thank you. Thank you. I'm probably talked too much, but
No, I think what can we do to help you? I know that there are several new bills that are going. Is there any way that you would like for us to write anything from this group to help you with that
Well,
at all?
from this group, I think the issue is really the theft from businesses. There's nothing we can do because they know that we can't stop them. You know, the pursuit legislation was really, we all know it's extremely dangerous to get in a pursuit. But there should be a risk factors taken into consideration when you pursue somebody, not just say blatant no pursuit. And I always had a problem with that because you could pursue a DUI, driving under the influence, that's okay, which makes no sense to me because they're already impaired. And now you're pursuing them when they're impaired. So, you know, I wish that they maybe would take a look at that again for risk factors, like what is the crime? What's the traffic like? What's the weather conditions like? What's the road like? What's the experience of the officer chasing them? There's a whole lot of things you can look at as far as why you would pursue or when to call it off. And so those things I think should have been coming into consideration. And they are doing some of those changes now, I hope. So that's what I would suggest, is that, you know, focus on those areas that really impact you, and that is the theft from businesses. And the reason that is because the crooks that are going out there and doing that feel empowered that they'll never get caught. All they have to do is get in the car. They're not even fearful anymore. They don't run. They don't even run out of the business anymore. They walk out of the business and they get in their car and they drive away because they know we can't stop them.
So the other day, there was a firebomb that went into Taco Time. Do we see that kind of stuff still coming this direction, or do you think it's staying over in North Bend?
Well, I look at it, and I know there's Snoqualmie and North Bend. I look at it, I'm the police chief of both communities, and I police the same in both communities, whether it's I care about both communities and the people that live in those communities. I think that was an isolated incident. Eastside Fire and Rescue is doing the investigation along with King County. But the appearance is that it's an isolated incident, but it's, you know, something that we look at and are concerned with, obviously. And so as far as it staying in North Bend or Snoqualmie, I think that we have the same people. The people that are doing stuff in North Bend are coming to Snoqualmie and doing the same thing.
They are.
And so if we make an arrest in North Bend on somebody, it really makes Snoqualmie safer too, because they're going back and forth.
It just seemed like the outlet mall was more of the grab and goes, smash and goes than anywhere else. And I was just
I agree.
thankful
I agree. The outlet mall we live at, literally.
Yes.
But I think that there's some great improvements that are happening there. There's a hotel going in there. There's some improvements that are going to be there. Hopefully that'll make a difference in the level of activity that we see there. But we do spend a lot of time there.
Some of my greatest calls that I get from the business owners are always they don't want to cause any problems, and they don't want to have you guys taken away from anything else. So they don't call you when they have big issues. And I think that just want to make sure from you that we can still say that call.
Absolutely. That's the only way we know what's going on.
That's what I
If
told
we don't
them.
get called or notified, we have no idea what's going on. We think, yeah, everything's good. You know, even if it's a small theft, we know that there's something going on there. If we don't hear nothing, we're really not going to focus on those areas because we don't have the staffing right now to do that. We are going to focus on areas where we have problems. And so, yeah, they have to call us. That's one. We just found out with the barista arrest, it's the community that makes the difference here. It's not necessarily law enforcement. You know, we're the ones that go out there and make the arrest or whatever, but it's the community that really gives us the information to be effective. And the business is a huge part of what we do. So you have to call us. So.
Wondering if I can share an observation on behalf of some of the downtown merchants as part of the liaison. And this is just a sentiment, an observation, and not meant to be disrespectful. I just need you to know that. And the question has been brought to me as a city, let me preface this, we're not Westlake, right? Where you've got this retail core that is suffering greatly with crime and that the city has had to come in. We're also not the city of Seattle, we're a small city of Snoqualmie. The sentiment is the value, there's an effort on Kelly's behalf, my behalf, to say that we are a safe environment of tourism and visitors, and yet we have a homeless shelter a block away from our downtown core. And that is a disconnect for the businesses. You know, we understand that housing people and having that in our community, but so is having a safe community where people can come to the community and walk the boardwalk and visit and shop and not have to see things that they don't want to see on their day off, right? And so that's a hard, and maybe this was something they discussed with you when you went to the downtown merchants. I was unable to be at that meeting, but I've heard this, and I just want you to know that that's a hard thing for them to balance. And I'm not we on their behalf, I'm not poking at you, Jennifer, but that's difficult, right? And the city probably bears some responsibility for that, being that, you know, we work closely with you. So that's just a hard pill for them to swallow, a block away.
Before I look,
Yeah.
before I stand back and look
Yeah.
at
Perry's like, Nicole, simmer down. Kelly, am I right? Though?
I think I look at it a different way, and I
Okay.
do understand where that's coming from.
Yeah. I'm just sharing
But-
sentiments I've heard.
Yeah, and that's no problem there. But if you put your perspective in, one, call us if there's an issue, and then we will do our best to handle it. But I think the perspective should be, it shows that's why this community is the way it is and who we
Right.
are. They're not putting, what it does is show as a caring community.
Yes.
To me, it shows a caring. Usually when you go into a community, it's not in my backyard. They're going to put them way out here. They're going to put them over here. This community puts it right here. This is who we are. We're here to help. We have resources if people are in need. We all know that. We're sitting here talking about there's people in need. We get up here and we talk about the population through the census. There's 310 homeless people that died last year from fentanyl overdose alone. 310 of them. So I think that what it does is it shows that the caring of this community. If there's an issue or a problem that is presented by the people that are served by Reclaim, then first Jennifer can be aware of that and deal with it. And we can also as well, because I'll guarantee you, we probably know who it is.
Right.
And we maybe have that relationship with them. But
I think
look at it
people don't
differently.
want to speak because they feel like it's an unpopular, then it's like the not in my backyard, or, I'm anti-homeless people. It's just, it's difficult being the proximity, of it. So just need you to know that,
Well, and to support both of you guys, which will be our next discussion item though, is our business visits. Again, this is something that we can add to that conversation to encourage to reach out to Jennifer or to the police department and maybe get the business relationships and the services relationships back together and cohesive and not have a disconnect that way. So we can add that to that.
Yeah, thank you. And I will say, we work really hard to be really available and very responsive. I think as an agency, we are really responsive when there is an issue. I think we all know the specific person that we're all thinking about right now that had just wreaked havoc through downtown Snoqualmie. This is somebody who lost access to our shelter many years ago. And I will disclose that for the very first time ever, we actually went to the King County Regional Homelessness Authority, met with them, because part of the reason why that person remained in our community is that we were serving a family member of his in our shelter. So we met with his family member, we worked to try to cut those ties so that this person wasn't accessing anything from this family member that was staying in our shelter. She was not able or not willing to do that. And so we ended up exiting her from our program too, which we have never done intentionally for behavior of somebody else. So I just wanted you to know that we explained that at the merchant meeting. And I think just really putting it out there, we're really having a homeless shelter, and I agree with Chief Phipps that these are our resident homeless folks. We're serving people that have lived here forever. And so, I live up on the ridge where I live in my own community and the community that I grew up in. And many of the people in our shelter are doing the same thing, but are not able to afford housing out here. But all that said, there is no way a shelter in this community without it having impact that is not that positive, feel good, doing good work. This community is supporting us. The city of Snoqualmie is a large financial supporter of ours, all of those things, right? There will always be some impact that isn't positive. And we really want to hear that so that we can do something about that. So thank you for sharing that. I'm going to leave my business card with you so we can chat about more details. But even talking to the merchants, just asking them, are there any other issues? And nothing else was brought up in that meeting aside from that specific person that we all know quite well that has now left our community. So please, we want to know. You're welcome. I have business cards I can leave, but you can also go to our website to find my phone number and my email. And please just communicate. I think through COVID too, some of that communication got dropped off because we were all just like, we were running towards the fire constantly and we were all trying to respond. We were trying to figure out how to grow our shelter as a very small nonprofit with a smaller budget than most. You guys were all trying to figure out how in the world to stay open, right? So that lack of communication, I think, kind of came up. So yeah.
And on a lighter note, you can, I say you as a community are back open to getting donations. So,
Yes.
and food. And I got my teenager
Yes.
to start delivering and he's like, we have a homeless shelter? I'm like, yeah.
I know. It always, we hear that so often. And I think, well, we must be doing something right if we've been here for a decade
So on the
and
flip
so many
side, it's,
people have
you
no
know,
idea.
I'm like, you're a pretty privileged boy. I'm like, you're going to start delivering once a month. And he's like, I didn't know this was here. I was like, yeah, you learned how to drive in the building right
Oh,
next
I
door.
love
So
that.
I'm getting that
Yes.
word out. As you
And
know,
we're
that's
looking
my-
forward to bringing meal volunteers back into our space again every time we've planned to do that because everybody's just doing that wonderful warm handoff at the door still. Another wave of COVID hits, or right now, the counties dropped the mask mandate inside of our shelter, but we have chosen to keep it in place until we make it through the winter. So once we make it through this trifecta of illness, we'll reevaluate and hopefully have you guys back actually inside our space again. So
thank you guys.
yeah, thank you.
Quick
Did you have-
question. This winter, we, like our lights got cut downtown. Just curious, is that kids or is it somebody just?
Oh, do you mean the holiday lighting?
No,
Why are you laughing, Perry?
I just was,
Lighting, holiday lighting. What are you
Holi- no,
talking about?
Something my
Yeah,
person
no,
I
it did
probably
happen a few times and I don't think we were able to identify who it was. I don't even know if I spoke to you about it, Perry. I think it might have been
Well, and
something we
Richard had
maintained within
something
Parks and
stolen
Public
too.
Works.
Actually, I just found out from one of our officers that had told me that had happened, so.
Yeah.
Richard's had quite a bit of stuff being stolen from his yard too.
With Richard, and we have security stuff that we put up, and in fact, I don't know if it's this week or last week, we actually opened an investigation on one of his cases with some leads, so.
That's great.
Maybe I'm guilty of the same thing, like why I don't want to bother, the police with the lights got vandalized,
See?
Yeah, I don't know.
Shame.
And there's maybe nothing we can do about it, but it
Precisely.
still gets documented that it happened,
Yeah,
so, it's still good.
okay.
Pardon me, Chair Harrison. We have everybody in the room, including Councilmember Christensen, who's on the line. And that's emergency shelter housing is part of the element that we need to look at. And Jen, you have the numbers on how many beds at any one time we have in emergency shelter. How many?
On any given night through our programs, through our shelter, through our motel voucher and program in our housing program, we're sheltering 60 individuals
60.
on any given night.
Okay, just to put things in perspective, especially for this group, we have at Panorama, there's 60% AMI. We have 191 units. Pickering Court, 30 units. By the way, the waiting list is 123 families right now, and Councilmember Christensen pointed that out a couple months ago. Skyview in North Bend has 20 units. King County, through Department of Commerce, is asking the two cities to come up with 604 units, housing units between now and 2044. We need to address that at some point.
You're
And
talking about
emergency housing. And here's the catch to it is, they have not told us what constitutes emergency housing in a very defined way that we could understand. On the King County Affordable Housing Committee that Kelly and I share a voting seat on. And the other thing is, they did say that out of the 1,200 some under 30% AMI, and again, it's like Pickering Court at 30 units, 20 units over at Sky View. Out of the 1,200, what percentage of those could be emergency shelter? But, you know, emergency shelter is part of the comprehensive plan, and having you here helps us understand it better, but that's going to be an ongoing conversation, I assume.
Correct. And Chair Harrison, if I could just add to that, the Department of Commerce will be providing local governments and the region more guidance on what those definitions mean, what those terms mean. So we're looking forward to receiving that information soon, is what they said.
And one other side note before Jen leaves, and I deeply appreciate having the shelter here, because one thing that I can go home every night and I don't see shopping carts, I don't see people homeless on our streets. It saddens me because once in a while I'll find that in the doorway of my business in North Bend. But having those resources, but we know that 60 beds is not enough. And there are people that are largely here in our communities. A lot of people are sleeping in their cars, are sleeping elsewhere, are couch surfing. But we definitely need to address that as you know, part of keeping our community whole. So thank you for
put this on to do maybe a committee within the EDC to have those conversations, and we can have some offline conversations with Jen as we move forward looking at the comp plan.
That sounds great. If I can just leave you guys just a couple things. Thank you, Rob. I love the fact that emergency shelter is kind of staying in that view. My dream is to never need emergency shelter, maybe need it for 3 or 4 people coming through one night before we get them into a more stable living situation. We are a really small shelter. We are very relationship driven. We have an amazing staff, and our ratio of staff to clients is unheard of in the sheltering community. You get into Bellevue and they'll have 2 staff for 100 people in shelter. We have 2 staff for 14 beds in our shelter. But even then, shelter is inherently traumatizing. It is not a way to live. It is not a way to prosper. Thankfully, we're 24/7 now, so the many of our folks that we have that work are able to rest and then go to work. People that are living in cars, trying to sustain a job is impossible. One last thing is, of that 32%, of people that were new to homelessness since November of 2020, a huge percentage of those people are baby boomers. These are our parents that are becoming homeless for the very first time, and they're terrified. They've had a spouse that has passed away. Many of them are priced out of their properties. They no longer had a mortgage, but they can't afford the property taxes anymore. And so they're losing everything that they have. So we need to really remember that as we're planning all of this, is how to take care of our chronically homeless folks, because that's a different level, but how to really care for our parents that are becoming unhoused. So, yeah, thank you.
Thanks, you guys.
Appreciate
it. So Emily, for the sake of time, we need to hear from Kelly and also the city, but you had on here the 2023 work program discussion. Is that
Correct, yeah. And Jason, do you want to go ahead and do the intro on the staff memo to the commission? Thank you.
Sure. So I will put this up so you can see it. I'm talking about here. So one of the things we've been working on here is developing a work program for the Economic Development Commission. This is intended to be an evolving document that will continually update through the year as the commission goes through its ongoing work. This will reflect priorities of the city administration, the direction of the city council, what the commission's working on. It doesn't mandate project completion, and it doesn't preclude us working on other things. This is just what we anticipate the commission working on throughout the year here. Right now, we have just the one major item, the comprehensive plan update on here. There's a lot wrapped up in that, of course, as I mentioned earlier about the goals and the policies and things that we're going to put in the economic development element about target industry clusters, for example, things we want to focus on with regard to, say, tourism, how to support businesses as we go. Worker availability, I think, is a major thing we're going to want to address as well. So I gotta move this out of the way so I can do this here. So the draft work program is here. It's just the comprehensive plan, economic development element. And there's no action required of the commission. This is mostly a discussion item and informational for you. So.
Yeah, if I could add, Chair, that this is an opportunity to reflect on other program items that might be suitable for 2024. And there's an opportunity too for us to meet with council committee on this, to share with them what you're working on, as well as the planning commission. The work you'll do on the comprehensive plan will filter through the planning commission and then up to the city council. So, great synergy, great opportunity to kind of reflect. I think when I was listening to the presentation from PSRC, I thought, well, perhaps, the Economic Development Commission might want to put something on like, business expansion or business retention. Those are real targeted efforts that would, require some thought and consideration and take a longer period of time to work on. So I'll just leave it at that for open for discussion.
Yeah, and can keep going back to the sake of time because we want to hear from you guys. But when the mayor and I met on Monday, one of the discussions that we had that rolls up, she wanted me to bring it up, is that the EDC is going to take back kind of the leadership on the business visits. And so that will help us get a post-COVID vibe on what we've already discussed, that we want those questions to roll back up into the comprehensive plan and some of what's happening in the business community. So we will be spearheading that and putting that on an action item for next month's agenda.
Oh, so we could add that to the work program, just in general, ongoing business visits?
Yeah, that's what she wanted.
That's great.
Kind of add that to that element. So, okay, great. And then, do you want to give?
One quick question. How much should our prioritization kind of be driven in this manner versus looking at the decisions the council is facing on the 1-2 year horizon and kind of working backwards from that?
That has been an ask that I've had to the mayor, to actually have the council be more present and transparent to the EDC, so we know exactly what they're asking for us to help work towards.
Do we have an opportunity to just get more visibility into like a 6-month agenda
Yes.
for the council?
Yeah, I mean, one of the ideas that I'd like to help move forward is this an opportunity for you to meet with a council committee and the planning commission. They would help embellish that work program and help you identify, large areas of concentrated efforts. We could add that to the work program, and perhaps this first quarter we could figure out a time for the Economic Development Commission and perhaps the CD committee and the Economic Development Commission and the Planning Commission. These work programs are coming from, from those groups as well, and will help you identify things.
Emily, I'm trying to find some clarity, because you're our representation from the council, basically from the city to EDC by title, correct?
Well, I'm the community development director. I don't represent the community development committee. I mean, we have other council members that represent that. The chair Johnson is in charge of that committee.
Okay, well, no, because I'm just saying, like, for our communication within the commission, when we're sitting here, it's kind of, I know, Jason, you take you take probably 90% of that work and say, this is what's being communicated. But I know a lot of our work directly comes from what's the directives from the council, those priorities looking forward. I mean, the comp plan is a huge piece, obviously. That work is a huge nugget. But I'm always looking for what's happening in the city. Like, I would love to be able to, for us to sit down monthly and have, some of those more the detailed pieces of the who's in, who's out. What are those licenses are in or out? What are those construction projects that are in or out? What are those challenges that are coming up? What are those discussions? Who are those discussions that, because I know it's not all on Kelly, that, not everybody just comes to Kelly and they're like, hey, I want to open a business. When it's larger, they're like, hey, City of Snoqualmie, I'd like to, land here with 400 people. What does that feel like? So I think that there's, sort of that constant communication and dialogue of what is happening right here, right now. I know we'll get some of that from our, just from going out into the community and talking to those businesses, but they're more established. So it's more that, I'm still looking for that directive from council to say, these are our priorities. This is, for me, I get completely hung up on, I know where our revenue comes from, that feeds the general fund. I know there's this retail aspect. For me, coming from Snoqualmie, it's completely flipped, right? So I'm trying to wrap my head around, there's, we have this nugget of housing and this property tax, but then how do we as an EDC say, our priority, thanks to the council, is we want to keep, we want to retain all the people here in the city. We don't want them to leave. They're working here. Who are the people that are working here? We want to keep them here. So what are those services that we need to then work with our business community to provide those services?
Yeah, and you've heard,
it's like that.
yeah, you heard
thing.
3 sectors being identified for folks that are coming here that, probably need housing. There are 3, the biggest job generating sectors. And then there's other sectors that are growing that we may want to consider bringing in here.
Right. I'm still like, I have this ambiguity, like this kind of this weird, like the EDC is just floating out there and we have this work, but we're not really being fed, like, this is where the city's going. This is the, going into the 2nd year of Mayor Ross's term. What is happening?
Well, yeah, it's a collaborative effort. I mean, I think that the EDC committee or commission could identify work program items. I think they could come from CD. I think they should come from Planning Commission. I think there should be, consideration of all those.
Is it, speaking out of turn, because I genuinely don't know, could we have, even though we have a representative from council, can we have someone come and speak on behalf of council or planning? Is that an option? Does that happen as a guest, a speaker?
Well, usually it's a joint meeting, where you would be able to have an opportunity to share information that you're working on, ask questions like that.
But I guess all of our concerns is that we're a support role. So we need the council to come to us. We need the CD to come to us. We need direction
Mark Hoffman
and
used to do that for us.
specifics from there. And maybe this is a further conversation that we can have offline too, but that has been discussed because we're here to support, but we're not being told what to support and what the factors are.
So Chair, if I may offer, my 7 years having been on the EDC, the greatest work of the EDC has been when we've put together from the EDC the top 10 lists of concerns. And those have resulted in SR 18 improvements, the interchange improvements, jobs and hosting job fairs for the first time. Those all came through here. The start of the Snow Valley Innovation Center came from here. So, I would urge this commission to come up with your top 10 and you send that to the council as your recommendation of the top 10 business concerns, and that will get the attention of the council. It's been effective in the past, and I, now that we're post-COVID, we can get back into that mode and pull up the old versions, and that should be in the CD as well. Pull up those top 10 issues and then make those priorities, because that directed council to do the actions they took. So that would be my encouragement.
What year was that, council member?
That would have been 2014. By the way, in 2014, when I joined, number 11 was SR 18, and Roger McCollum and I made that one of the top concerns for this committee and for this commission. So it has a strong impact, but you've got 7 brilliant minds on the CDC. So we need to leverage that.
And just so you know, SR 18 is up today or tomorrow on us getting funded. So that's a big, huge thing.
Yeah.
Great. Why don't we do a
Quick.
2-minute and then.
Okay, really quick. Tomorrow, this is very important. We have a grand opening for laser, Beyond Laser and Skincare on Center Boulevard at 4 o'clock tomorrow. And just want to make sure that people are coming out to these ribbon cuttings for these new businesses, because it's a big, huge thing that we still have businesses during this time. Very difficult to do that. We also, next Wednesday, we are bringing the King County Creative Arts and Film Works and also the Washington State Film Works here to do our luncheon, and that is critically important because our film industry is amazing and has so much economic impact to this area, more than I think most other things do. And so please come and do that, because that is really, really important. And then March is Women's International Month. And just to let you guys know, more than 75% of our business owners are women in Snoqualmie, which is very different than almost any other community in the whole state. We are going to be doing a lot of information on that. We've got some big articles coming out on that, and we're just going to celebrate that. Dirtfish is also bringing Michelle Moudon out to, she's the first rally car driver, woman rally car driver in the world, and she's actually coming here to Snoqualmie, and it is a huge, huge thing. And I just want people to come out and share. It's free for the public to come out. Just want to make sure that people absolutely come out and celebrate with us.
Just this is the time of the year where it's forecasting and planning for what's coming up next, and working with different partners, whether it's the chamber, the ROA, the downtown merchants, external partners, and just leveraging all those opportunities, looking at grants, the LTAC grants. That application process was last week. We'll be evaluating those in the next weeks to come. So that's just kind of where I'm at, is planning for the year. Done.
That's quick. Does anyone online or in person have anything else to add?
Move to adjourn.
Oh, second, sorry.
Consider adjourned motion at 10:02, January 18th at 10:02. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.